Okay, now we're live with Trusted Router Q&A. So I'm going to answer some most frequently asked questions for this week, and we're going to clip this and use it in some of our social media. So let's go one by one, talk about some things that I want to talk about through the week. Feel free to post any other questions you might have. First question, how can the same AI model beat itself? Well, that's some interesting research we've been doing at TrustedRouter. We have found that if you have a single model, it can perform okay on a problem. But then if you take that same model and run it over and over again, maybe twice in parallel or 3 times or 4 times, we found you can run it 9 times and keep getting more and more improvements. We have a great blog post showing us doing that for Minimax. And it's very fascinating because it always gets better and better each time. And we see this when you have multiple different kinds of models with Fusion, but just from the sheer randomness, we can see that if with a high temperature, even just the same model repeatedly, we're going to see improvements. Next question. If you can afford one strong model call, where should it go? If you are wanting to pay a little bit more and you don't want to do things in parallel or Fusion, and you're just trying to find the nice, good, efficient, but strong model, then Kimi K3 today is probably the best bet that you have right now. That is a fully available model. We have tons of resources selling Kimi K3 tokens, and you're paying about $15 per million tokens there. Not as expensive as Fable, but nearly as good results, and it even outperforms in many benchmark evals. For example, the legal eval, it does quite well, or front end, it does really, really well. Next question. How can identical model weights answer differently depending on the host? So sometimes we have this question, why am I getting different answers even when I call the same task? Well, that's because there's a thing called temperature, and it's randomly choosing the answer based on what you're asking it. But then you might have different providers, and the quality of the answer might vary very differently, not just when you ask, but who the provider is. And the answer for that is different providers have different quantization levels. For example, Deep Infra quantizes everything to 4 bits. 4 bits is quite small. A lot of these are trained at native braid float 16, BF16, which is 16 bits, 4 times as many bits. So you get a lot of more information per parameter. So a lot of them are FP8, which means 8-bit. So you have a lot of different opportunities to compress the model to save RAM in the KV cache. And when you do that, you have a smaller model. They often are nearly as good, 90% as good, 70% as good. But when you use it, it's just noticeably not as good. So you're going to see this variance, and a lot of it has to do with the compression on the parameters. There's also an issue. Sometimes the kernels that are used to actually run the model can vary quite a lot in quality and might take different shortcuts. So that might also show up while you're trying out models. So please be aware that, find out the hosts the providers that you really love, and make sure you can set them. You can set them in the parameters of which ones you want to use and which ones you don't want to use. Next question. How did Taiwan and Hong Kong make a top synthesizer return nothing? Yeah, so when we were doing our Fusion experiments, we were finding that some of our results were turning totally empty. And that's because we had a judge and a synthesizer fusing results, and the synthesizer was a GLM model that was actually being hosted in China. And in China, we saw that we have this is very interesting. We have a benchmark called Freedom Bench, and the Freedom Bench benchmark is very interesting. The Freedom Bench benchmark actually tries out different questions as it relates to Chinese history, like about the Uyghurs or Taiwan or Hong Kong or Tiananmen Square, and then it figures out, does this model return a response that's truthful and accurate, that the whole world outside of China agrees with, or is it vacillating, biasing itself, or is it just refusing to answer? And we found that different providers in China will have different responses to it in order to censor. Some of them just don't answer. They don't even give a response. It just kind of like dies, crashes in the middle. Some of them say, sorry, I can't answer that. So anyway, one of the ones we tried was actually just dying and not answering. And I was wondering why I spent like $2 on fusion results and then it just didn't answer. And it's because the synthesizer saw the word Hong Kong implying it's separate from China, implying it was a separate province. And the classifier just shut it down. And so that's when I learned you have to be very careful about Chinese hosts. We offer them, but you want to be careful because there's absolutely censorship at the provider level, even if it's not in the model. Look up their Freedom Bench on GitHub to learn more. Next, why did a 4-cent biology model know the answer but failed to finish the long job? So one thing that we're seeing a lot is that a simple model from an open weight system can just answer questions about biology, and they can be very cheap and efficient and fast. But then you ask Fable a question about biology, like what is mtDNA or what is DNA, and it'll say, sorry, I can't answer that, it's too dangerous. And that's because the restrictions that Anthropic has put onto their models are way too restrictive. You can't do AI research. You can't ask basic questions about what is DNA. You can't. What else can't you do? You can't do cybersecurity research or often any kind of engineering, and just get so many refusals. It's what is even the point? And so my recommendation is use open weight models. They're not going to refuse for these things. They might refuse if they're censored. There are ways to use obliteration, like Heretic on GitHub, to obliterate a model. But you can do anything you want with those models. But it's just important. The neurodiversity allows you to be free from censorship of all kinds, whether it's American model censorship or for basic biology, or Chinese model censorship for questions of Chinese sovereignty. Do you have any other questions, you live viewers? I want to answer any other questions that you might have. Any news for today? Well, we're coming out with news that's happening this week. We're announcing our big fundraise, so watch out for that news. We're very proud of having our investors involved. We're excited about this big launch week we're having this week. Another big article is going to come out about how we're positioning ourselves to really be the alternative to Anthropic, the American open source Anthropic. We think that by offering a neurodiverse set of models, being open source, we can actually replace everyone's API use for models and let everyone use it as they want. That's our goal. That's what we want. And yeah, I really want to hear what people are thinking in live. Please comment. Well, I'll be back tomorrow. Make more videos later, okay? Thanks.